Hello, welcome to the morning news. Our top story takes us back to Nepal. A new earthquake rocked the country, causing more buildings to collapse, killing at least 16 people and injuring over 300. The quake was 7.4 magnitude and the weakest aftershock 5.1. Nepal was hit by a 7.9 magnitude earthquake on April the 25th, which has left over 8,000 people dead and close to 20,000 injured. Hundreds fled to the airport in the capital of Kathmandu this Tuesday to leave the devastated country. Thousands poured into the streets, fearing further damage.
I'm trying to call to my home, but network is busy. It's not reachable. I'm worried for my family.
And after a meeting with leader Fidel Castro and urging an end to the 55-year U.S. blockade against Cuba, French President François Hollande vowed his government would do everything possible to help end the harm and economical measure. Cuban media reported that a deal was reached with France for oil exploration in Cuban waters. French oil company Total later denied any such agreement. Hollande also met with his counterpart Raúl Castro. The French president announced a series of agreements with Cuba in areas such as education, medicine, agriculture, and trade.
We want to build an exceptional cooperation between France and Cuba to deepen our relations.
Journalists in Honduras face many dangers. Our correspondent Gerardo Torres explains the constant fear they live in while doing their job.
Honduran journalists Francisco Zúñiga and Carlos Posadas presented proof last Thursday that they had been threatened for doing their work, despite the recent passing of a journalist protection law in the National Congress, highlighting the lack of protection many journalists feel they have.
Nothing has changed. We have a law that recently was approved just before Honduras was to present a report on its human rights situation. It was written in a rush and it guarantees nothing. They're going to give you protection from state structures, such as the national police and maybe the military police, that we know are themselves involved in acts of corruption.
In 10 years, 51 journalists have been murdered and only one case has been investigated. Human rights defenders have expressed concern about ongoing threats to journalists.
I think that journalists, by the nature of their work, are exposed to danger. What we say to the state of Honduras is that they have to allocate the necessary funds that the law approved for the protection of human rights defenders, including journalists and others. This will ensure that this law is effective because they have approved many laws that are not effective as there isn't a real will from the state.
Honduran journalists currently facing threats are continuing to do their work without any protection. Many demand that the state provides the protection to allow true freedom of speech and press in the country. Gerardo Torres, Telesur, Central America.
Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos said that the leaders of the South American countries' rebel groups have visited Cuba to take part in meetings amid the country's ongoing peace talks. Santos said he facilitated FARC leader Rodrigo Londoño's and the ELN commander Nicolas Rodriguez's trip in favor of peace for Colombia. He also said that their safe return to the country was guaranteed.
I authorized FARC members who today are in Havana will return to Colombia in the next few weeks to assist in the humanitarian demining work taking place.
And now to Peru, where citizens continue to raise concerns with what would be one of the largest economic multinational agreements. Our correspondent Rael Mora has the story, man.
Limiting the freedom to communicate and debate through the internet is one of the issues of concern for the Peruvian civil society organizations, who have issued a statement warning of the closing of the negotiations for the Trans-Pacific Partnership Treaty, or TPP. Documents leaked show the treaty will implement a system in which private internet providers, instead of state courts, will be the ones deciding whether or not content is in violation of established rules.
This is going to result in making internet opinions, comments, articles, or any type of creation susceptible to being deleted only after accusation of violating copyrights. This means that the freedom of expression that Peruvians and all citizens of the countries signing the treaty will be tremendously cut.
The treaty is currently being negotiated between the US and 11 countries in secret, with over 600 corporate advisors, including Halliburton and Caterpillar. The civil society organization's warning also argues that the TPP limits the power of the state to allow the sale of necessary generic medicines and take actions concerning health, environmental safety, and labor rights.
Just like the Pacific Alliance, the TPP seeks to consolidate a determined strategy of development pushed by the free trade agreement model of the US. If that's the option to be followed, then it's correct. But if what we want is to have alternatives for Latin America, we are in serious problems.
Professor Farley trusts instead of models in which South-to-South relationships are prioritized because they are better for economic diversification and long-term development. He concludes that the TPP will instead end up limiting the margin for economic maneuver for Peru and the other developing countries in the negotiations. Rael Mora, Telesur, Lima.
Greece paid about $804 million to the International Monetary Fund on Monday, a day before it was due, averting the prospect of default. The payment comes after a meeting with the Eurogroup finance ministers in Brussels, with whom no deal has yet been reached regarding Greece's debt. Greek Finance Minister Yanis Varoufakis acknowledged that their deal was not likely and that Athens is close to running out of cash.
Europe is calling on the United Nations Security Council to support its plan to stop the flow of migrants across the Mediterranean into Europe.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry arrived in Russia for a scheduled meeting with President Vladimir Putin to discuss Ukraine, Yemen, Syria, and Iran. Kerry hopes to explore Russia's willingness to curb its alleged involvement in Ukraine, but said sanctions against Moscow would not be discussed. Relations between Russia and the U.S. are at their lowest level since the Cold War. Washington has already intervened in Ukraine, while failing to provide any evidence that Russia is militarily backing the eastern Ukraine rebels. And hours before the humanitarian truce for Yemen was due to come into effect Tuesday night, Saudi forces and the Houthi rebels exchanged the heavy artillery fire in what was described as an escalation of fighting. Saudi war plans pounded the capital of Sana'a at the same time that it deployed heavy military equipment to the border with Yemen. The Saudi-led coalition has carried out thousands of airstrikes on Yemen since March the 26th, killing more than 1,200 people and injuring close to 15,000. The EU has called on the United Nations Security Council to support its plan to stop the flow of migrants into Europe by dismantling people smuggling organizations and destroying their vessels. European Union leaders have agreed to identify, capture, and destroy vessels before they are used by traffickers, but it isn't clear how this will be carried out. The announcement comes after a sharp increase in migrants from Asia, Africa, and the Middle East trying to reach Europe. This year alone, 1,800 of them have died at sea. And we go on. A Picasso oil painting from 1955 has smashed the record for the most expensive artwork ever sold at auction. The painting Women of Algiers was sold for just under $180 million. Christie's auction house has estimated that it would sell for about $140 million. And we end our newscast on a disappointed note. Famous quarterback Tom Brady has been banned only 4 games, while his team, England Patriots, has been fined $1 million for cheating in NFL games by deflating balls before the game. Footballs with less air permitted Brady to throw longer distances and with greater accuracy. They are also easier to catch. And instead of apologizing, this is what he replied when he asked if he cheated.
I don't believe so. I mean, I feel like I've always played within the rules. I would never do anything to break the rules.
More on these on our website, telesurtv.net/English. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.